Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Trevor Drake finally bought his dream cabin in the Appalachian Mountains, he expected peace. What he got instead was war against an obsessive HOA, forged documents, and a power-hungry woman named Karen. But Trevor had one thing they didn't: the law, and no intention of backing down. I'd been dreaming about this place for the better part of 15 years. Through burned-out jobs, tangled bureaucracy, and long drives through the sticks to inspect storm-damaged red oaks or illegal backwoods dumps, I kept one image in my mind: a porch with chipped white railing, a cold beer, two dogs lazing at my feet, and the Appalachian Lake shimmering through a break in the trees. That image got me through droughts, wildfires, and a nasty rotavirus I caught crawling through a sewage marsh in Nameless County. And now, finally, it was mine. My name's Trevor Drake. I'm 41, recently retired from the Forest Service, and I just bought my dream: a 12-acre spread tucked above Lake Halston, western North Carolina, far from board meetings, mandatory lawn colors, and the diseased concept of suburban shared values. The property is private, off-grid but fully legal, and very much not part of any homeowners association. I paid good money to make sure of that. The day we arrived was textbook perfect. The moving truck creaked behind my Tacoma. Sarah rode shotgun with a half-eaten gas station egg sandwich in her lap, and our two mutts were sprawled across the back seat like furry aristocrats. We hit gravel around noon and started climbing. Trees grew thicker, the road narrowed, cell signal blinked out, and suddenly the world was quiet again, just the way I wanted it, except someone was waiting. The moment I rounded the last bend and crested the driveway, I slammed the brakes. Three figures stood blocking the entry gate. A rusted, padlocked cattle panel I had every intention of replacing, each wearing matching khaki vests with cheap clip-on badges. One held a clipboard, the other a folded plastic sign, and the third, the one in heels, pearl earrings, and a power blazer like she'd stepped out of a damn Chamber of Commerce meeting, stood dead center, arms crossed like a sheriff in a spaghetti western. That was the moment I knew we had a problem. Before I could say a word, she raised one hand and barked, "State your name and purpose, sir." I blinked. "I own this property. Just closed last week. Name's Trevor Drake." She took one aggressive step forward. "This property was recently voted into the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I'm Karen Pendleton, President and Acting Enforcement Chair. We'll need to review your plans for renovation, confirm you understand the architectural guidelines, and receive your compliance paperwork within 72 hours. I stared at her. "I'm sorry, did you just say voted into the HOA?" "Yes. The community held a special vote in April. As of May 1st, this parcel is part of our regulated zone." "No," I said slowly, calmly. "That's incorrect. This land is parcel 37-F, zoned R2, and it is not, I repeat, not a part of Whispering Pines. I checked the plat myself. My lawyer double-checked. I even confirmed with the county clerk. This house and these 12 acres are private, unregulated, and not under your jurisdiction." Karen sniffed. "Well, that may have been the case previously, but the neighborhood evolved. We expanded. The residents voted. Inclusion was approved unanimously." "I'm not a resident," I said. "I wasn't even aware of your vote. You can't just vote someone's property into an association they didn't agree to." She looked at me like I'd grown antlers. "That's not how we do things up here." I stepped out of the truck, careful not to startle anyone. "Look," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I've got paperwork in the glove box. The deed, the tax records, county zoning map. I'll show you right now." But she raised a hand again. "Sir, do not approach. This is now a contested space. Any movement toward this house may be interpreted as trespassing until compliance is established. I'm calling the sheriff." "Trespassing?" I laughed, but it came out sharp. "Lady, I own this place. You're the ones trespassing." The guy with the clipboard finally spoke. "Ma'am, he did say he has the deed." Karen ignored him and took out her phone. "Dispatch?" "Yes. I need an officer at 37 Halston Ridge Lane. Yes, we have a male attempting to enter an unoccupied property. Claims ownership, but no compliance file on record." Sarah leaned out the passenger window, wide-eyed. "Are you serious right now?" Karen held up a finger like she was muting her own indignation. "You can consider yourself evicted, Mr. Drake. Until the proper paperwork is filed, you have no right to be here." I took a long, measured breath. "You're gonna regret this," I said, mostly to myself. "Is that a threat?" she snapped, eyes lighting up. "No," I said, opening the glove box. "It's a prediction." And as I stood there, holding my deed in one hand while she kept yapping into the phone, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I was amused, deeply, dangerously amused. They wanted a war? Fine. But I wasn't the one who'd lose it. I didn't move, not an inch. I stood there in the sun with a manila envelope of legal documents in one hand and my truck idling behind me, exhaust hissing like the last breath of logic leaving the mountain. Karen kept talking into her phone like she was ordering an airstrike. The two men behind her shifted uncomfortably. One checked his watch, the other looked like he wanted to melt into the tree line. After a few minutes, she hung up with a smug smile that could curdle paint. "Sheriff's office will be here shortly. I suggest you remain where you are until we sort this out." "I'm not going anywhere," I said, setting the envelope on my hood and folding my arms. "And if you're smart, neither will you. Because the moment the deputy steps out of his car, I'm going to hand him a deed, a plat map, a boundary survey, and a letter from the county confirming that this land is, brace yourself, not part of Whispering Pines." Karen smirked. "The county makes mistakes. The board has maps too." "Sure, drawn in crayon on the back of HOA newsletters." She didn't respond. Her lips pressed tight, eyes locked on the long bend in the road as if willing the sheriff to show up with handcuffs and a crowbar. Sarah stepped out of the truck then, dogs barking behind her, and joined me at the front. "This is insane," she muttered. "You weren't kidding about mountain politics." "I told you we should have brought the drone footage," I said. We didn't have to wait long. About 20 minutes later, a dusty Ford Explorer crawled up the hill and stopped just short of the gate. Out stepped a county deputy in wraparound shades, radio crackling at his shoulder, and a bored look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. He glanced at Karen, then at me, then at the dogs barking like mad behind the truck's windows. Karen practically ran to him. "Officer, thank God. That man is unlawfully occupying a residence that falls under HOA jurisdiction. He's refused to submit compliance forms, has no record of community approval, and has entered the property with aggressive intent. I believe he may be armed." The deputy turned to me, eyebrows lifted behind his shades. "You carrying, sir?" "Not at the moment," I said. "It's in the glove box. Registered, legal, holstered, and locked." He nodded. "Can I see some ID?" "Sure thing." I handed it over along with the deed and survey papers. "Name's Trevor Drake. Bought the property last month. Parcel 37F. Independent of HOA regulation. County knows it." Clerk signed off. "I've got the zoning certificate in there too." Karen scoffed behind him. "He's fabricated all of that." The deputy took a long look at the documents, flipping through them slowly, then pulled out his phone. "Let me just confirm this." While he made the call, a car pulled into the neighboring driveway, the cabin just downhill, tucked beneath a cluster of maple trees. Out stepped a woman with a cane and a ball cap that read Halston Lake Bait and Tackle. She squinted up the hill and started toward us with the kind of slow, deliberate confidence that only comes with age and not giving a single damn. "Afternoon," she called out. "Somebody want to tell me why there's an HOA mob outside Trevor's new place?" Karen's face froze. "Mabel, please. This is a private matter." The old woman reached the gate and leaned on her cane. "Private matter, my ass. I've lived next to this parcel since the 80s. Used to belong to the Grissom family. Never once was it part of Whispering Pines. And it damn well ain't now." The deputy turned. "Ma'am, can I get your full name for the record?" Mabel stuttered. "And I'll testify under oath, if need be. That property's always been private. And this one," she jabbed her cane at Karen, "has been trying to annex half the ridge ever since she moved in." Karen turned bright red. "That's slander." "It's called memory," Mabel said. "You should try having one." I could have hugged her. The deputy's radio crackled. He stepped aside, listened for a moment, then nodded. "Confirmed. Parcel 37F is registered as an independent holding. Zoned residential agricultural non-HOA. No compliance requirement. No jurisdiction." I let out a slow breath as Karen opened and closed her mouth like a guppy. The deputy turned to her. "Ma'am, unless you have documentation to the contrary, I'm going to have to ask you to step back and let the owner move in." Karen's voice was tight. "I will be filing a formal complaint. This isn't over." "I'm sure it's not," I muttered. We started unloading. I carried in the first box myself. Old books, mostly field guides and botany texts, some with notes I'd written 2 decades ago. Sarah followed with bedding. The dogs rolled in the grass like they'd found their own personal heaven. The men in khaki vests disappeared fast. Karen lingered by the road, scowling at her phone like she was trying to telepathically contact Satan's legal team. She turned one last time before leaving and shouted, "You've made a terrible mistake. The community will not tolerate this defiance." I didn't even look up, just said, "Then it's a good thing I'm not part of your community." Later that evening, the video Sarah took made the rounds on Facebook. Karen's shrieking voice, her waving phone, Mabel's cane stabbing the air like a rapier. The post was titled, "HOA Karen tries to evict new homeowner on day 1, gets schooled by old lady legend, 200,000 views by midnight, hashtag not my hoe." I woke up 2 days later to the sound of a delivery van crunching gravel outside my front porch. A man in a gray polo shirt hopped out, clipboard in hand, and made his way up the steps. He didn't look like a postman. I stepped out barefoot with coffee in hand, nodded, and he handed me an envelope marked urgent. Legal documents enclosed. Certified mail, he said. Signature required. From who? He just shrugged. Whispering Pines HOA. I scrawled my name and opened it on the spot, expecting another tantrum about Facebook or a cease and desist for owning dogs with too much personality. What I got was a 5-page letter titled Notification of Non-Compliance and Mandatory Architectural Correction. The gist of it? According to their records, I was in clear violation of community standards for 3 illegal structures: a detached tool shed, it was a prefab storage unit, a wooden patio overhang, pre-existing 30 years old, and, I kid you not, the inappropriate display of wildlife-themed mailbox art. Apparently, the hand-carved black bear holding our mailbox was not in keeping with Whispering Pines' unified suburban aesthetic. It got worse. Attached was a corrected zoning map showing my property as included in the HOA boundary, dated retroactively to 4 weeks before my closing date. A second attachment referenced a community vote with signatures from residents I'd never met, claiming I had been offered a chance to object to inclusion. I hadn't, because it never happened. I called my lawyer. Laura Green wasn't just a lawyer. She was an apex predator in a pantsuit, with 2 decades of experience dismantling overreaching HOAs like a mechanic stripping an old truck for parts. When I explained the situation, she didn't laugh. She growled. "You're telling me they retroactively redrew parcel lines and issued compliance threats based on internal votes you weren't party to?" "That's what the paperwork says." "Good," she said, "because that's about the dumbest legal overreach I've seen this quarter, and I deal with people who've tried to regulate tree shadows." We scheduled an in-person consultation the next day. In the meantime, I kept my head down and got to work unpacking. I should have known better. By sundown, a city-issued vehicle pulled up to the edge of my driveway. 2 men stepped out, building inspectors, one holding a digital tablet, the other a measuring wheel. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping off the porch. "Afternoon, sir. Got a complaint filed with the county zoning office. Claims of unpermitted construction, possible easement violations. Got to do a quick check." I blinked. "Complaint came from HOA?" "Filed anonymously," one said, "but most of these come through them. Standard procedure, sir." I exhaled slowly. "You're not stepping a toe on my land without a warrant." "We're not here to escalate," the other said. "We just need to confirm the structures you've got match what's in the county file." "Which they do," I said. "And if you'd like to confirm that, you can request records from the county office like everyone else. You'll find permits dating back to 1992. They exchanged a glance. I gave them my lawyer's card. They left. That night, someone taped a flyer to my mailbox. "Outsiders must comply. Protect the neighborhood spirit. Complain if you see something." There was no name, no logo, just a line at the bottom. Whispering Pines Cares. I didn't sleep much. Around midnight, I walked the fence line with a flashlight and a retriever. One of the posts near the northern boundary had been knocked half loose, like someone had kicked it on the way by. Probably kids. Or maybe Karen making another moonlight visit to make sure her imaginary empire hadn't collapsed overnight. In the morning, I found a new note in my mailbox. This one was neatly folded and signed, "Mr. Drake. You can end this now by agreeing to submit to the HOA and removing the structures in violation. Otherwise, formal action will continue. Your cooperation is expected. President K. Pendleton. I read it 3 times. Then I laminated it, date-stamped it, and dropped it in a file titled Litigation Bait. Laura called that afternoon. We're filing a cease and desist and preparing a fraud complaint. By the time I'm done with them, they'll need a legal map just to find their asses. I like your confidence, I said. You'll love my strategy, she replied, because I'm also subpoenaing their voting records, map revisions, and zoning submissions. If they forged anything, we're going scorched earth. I looked around my property, at the old barn, the tool shed, the dogs sunbathing under the porch swing. I'd wanted peace. Instead, I was getting a case study in American land warfare. But you know what? I'd seen worse. Forest fires, oil spills, even bureaucrats from D.C. Karen. She was just another invasive species. Laura Green drove up to the cabin in a silver Subaru, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, sunglasses mirrored and merciless. She didn't waste time. "Let me see the originals," she said, before even shaking my hand. We set up on the back porch with 2 cups of coffee, a stack of county maps, and enough paperwork to reforest half the hill if things went badly. She flipped through the corrected HOA map, snorted once, then held it up to the light. They used the wrong topographic layer. Look here, they didn't even line up the parcel numbers. Amateurs. You think that'll hold in court? I think we're going to bury them in their own paperwork. But I need access to every communication you've received since closing. Emails, letters, even that tacky flyer. I handed over the bundle I'd started labeling Karen's paper trail and then showed her the laminated note from the mailbox. She read it out loud with the kind of theatrical disdain only a practiced litigator can muster. "Your cooperation is expected." Good Lord, it's like she's cosplaying a medieval duchess. She pulled out her tablet, opened up the county land records, and cross-referenced the plat with the scanned title history I'd sent her earlier. Okay, there's no recorded easement, no shared development covenant, no HOA overlay. You're in the clear. Which means their attempt to rewrite history is either a delusion, she said, or an actual criminal conspiracy. She smiled when she said it, which was mildly unsettling. We spent the next 3 hours drafting an official cease and desist addressed to both Karen Pendleton and the Whispering Pines HOA board. Laura's wording was sharp, surgical, and laced with just enough venom to make a seasoned bureaucrat lose bladder control. Then she added a formal demand for disclosure, original HOA bylaws, voting records, architectural control logs, and a copy of any parcel expansion initiatives. Deadline 5 business days. "Think they'll comply?" I asked. "Hell no," she said. "But they'll either lie in writing, which helps us, or they'll stall, which also helps us." As we wrapped up, her phone buzzed. She read the message and frowned. "This just came in from my contact at the county registry. You're not going to like it." I waited. Someone from the zoning office, name redacted, submitted a boundary change request 3 weeks ago, not for Whispering Pines in general, just for your parcel. They tried to sneak in a reclassification under community utility revision. What the hell is that? Usually used for road easements, trail access, or underground infrastructure. They might have disguised it as a fire lane or drainage corridor. If it had gone through unnoticed, it would have created a shadow jurisdiction. And you're telling me this was filed before I even moved in? Exactly, which means this wasn't a reaction. This was a setup. My stomach turned. So they knew I was buying. They planned this. "Looks that way," she said, already scrolling. "I'm filing a fraud complaint tomorrow and contacting the county ethics board." I stood there, gripping the porch rail, watching the lake through the trees. The wind was calm, the surface like glass. But below that calm, the water could drown you. I felt something shift. Not panic, not even anger, just a cold, steely thread pulling tight behind my ribs. That night, as if on cue, I got a knock at the door. It was a man in slacks and a tucked-in HOA polo holding a clipboard and a pen like a game show host caught in the wrong neighborhood. "Evening, Mr. Drake," he said. "Just here to conduct your onboarding inspection for Whispering Pines." I stared at him. "Are you high?" He blinked. "I'm sorry. Buddy, you have exactly 5 seconds to get off my porch before I call the sheriff and file a harassment report." He looked momentarily confused, then annoyed. "You don't have to be hostile. It's a routine courtesy inspection. I'm not part of your HOA." He raised his clipboard like it was a holy relic. "According to our records." "Your records are a tissue fire waiting for a match," I said. "This is private land. Get off it. Now." He left, slowly with a practiced kind of irritation like I'd just ruined his evening mint julep. I texted Laura. He came. I told him to walk. Good. I'm drafting the complaint now. Don't talk to them again. Everything goes through me. Understood, but they're not stopping. They will, I promise. But first, we're going to light them up from the inside. The next morning, we filed 3 documents: a cease and desist, a formal complaint of attempted jurisdictional fraud, and a subpoena request for all HOA boundary votes in the past 12 months. The message was clear. You came to the wrong damn mountain. By the end of that week, the gloves were off. Laura wasn't just building a case. She was tearing open the floorboards of the Whispering Pines HOA and shining a floodlight on every roach skittering beneath it. What started as a personal land dispute was quickly evolving into something else entirely, something bigger, systemic, and rotting from the inside. It started with the subpoenas. We demanded the HOA's voting logs, parcel annexation records, and all internal communication regarding boundary expansions. Predictably, they stalled. Claimed they couldn't locate certain files, that others were being reviewed by counsel, and that some, quote, may have been lost in a recent digital migration. Laura responded with a motion to compel and a polite but lethal cover letter that used the phrase intentional obstruction 5 times in 2 paragraphs. Then we got lucky. A former board member named Darren Wilcox contacted Laura through her firm's tip line. He said he'd resigned from Whispering Pines HOA 3 months ago because he wasn't comfortable with how things were being handled. Translation: Karen had gone off the rails, and he wanted to clear his conscience before the ship sank with him on it. Darren agreed to a deposition. Under oath, he laid it out. Yes, Karen had orchestrated a parcel reclamation plan. Yes, she'd lobbied to include remote properties into HOA control under the pretense of future community cohesion. Yes, she'd filed paperwork with a friend in the zoning office, one Terry Goss, since quietly transferred to another department, to create a fake boundary adjustment around my property. And yes, she'd bypassed a community vote entirely. The so-called signatures in their files were collected from unrelated events, a bake sale, a dog park petition, even a neighborhood Halloween contest, then slapped onto the expansion request. Karen called it preemptive governance, Darren said, voice flat. Said people don't know what's best for their land until you show them. I sat in silence as Laura took notes, not interrupting. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me came next. She forged a compliance citation last winter, Darren continued. Tried to fine an elderly couple on the South Ridge for putting up wind chimes without board approval. When they pushed back, she had a contractor install a 6-foot fence between their yard and the community trail, overnight. Called it a safety buffer. Laura looked up from her notes. Would you be willing to testify to that in court? Darren didn't blink. I already said goodbye to my lawn committee. I might as well finish what I started. We filed an amended complaint that same afternoon, adding charges of fraudulent misrepresentation, abuse of position, and coordinated administrative tampering. Laura also submitted a request for a temporary injunction to prevent the HOA from contacting me further until trial. By now, the clerk at the county courthouse recognized Laura's handwriting and greeted her by name. That weekend, things got loud. The story broke in the local paper, a front-page piece titled HOA Power Grab. Local landowner accuses association of forgery and harassment. Inside were excerpts from Darren's deposition, maps comparing the real and forged boundaries, and, cherry on top, a screen grab of Karen yelling into her phone during the sheriff incident, her finger wagging like a drunken mascot. Karen responded as expected, badly. She called a special HOA meeting, tried to spin the whole thing as external disinformation, and told attendees the lawsuit was an attempt to undermine community unity. Several neighbors walked out. One man reportedly stood up and asked, "Are we paying dues to fund this crap?" Then came the anonymous envelope. It was slipped under Laura's office door late Monday. No return address. Inside was a printed email thread between Karen, zoning official Terry Goss, and someone from the Whispering Pines Architectural Committee. Subject line: Parcel 37F Absorption Strategy. The emails discussed me by name. The plan was to quietly include my land into the HOA under the pretense of environmental protection. Karen claimed I was likely to build unauthorized structures given his forestry background, and suggested a firm show of authority during a move-in. They'd planned it, weeks in advance, before I'd even closed on the place. Laura stared at the papers for a long time. This is a coordinated land grab. Can we prove it? With this, she said, grinning. Oh, we're going nuclear. We added conspiracy to commit administrative fraud to the list. Karen was subpoenaed directly. So was Terry Goss. So was the HOA's architectural review officer, whose signature, conveniently, appeared on every compliance warning I'd received. And just when I thought things couldn't escalate further, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Wesley Shaw, a county supervisor. Mr. Drake, he said, I've been following your case. I think it's time we talk. Wesley Shaw didn't waste time. We met the next morning in the county administration building, a squat red brick structure with coffee-stained carpet and the soft hum of old fluorescent lights. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a weathered blazer and bolo tie with the expression of someone who'd been putting out brush fires in local politics since dial-up internet. He offered me his hand and spoke plainly. I've been dealing with HOA complaints for 15 years, Mr. Drake. Most of them are noise, dog barking, paint colors, someone's cousin parking a boat in the driveway. Yours has teeth. We've had whispers about whispering pines for a while now, but no one's had the guts or evidence to push back. Until now. He leaned in, steepling his fingers. If what your lawyers found is real, and I believe it is, this goes far beyond a property dispute. We're talking zoning manipulation, forgery, misuse of public office. And that's felony territory. I told him about the emails, the reclassified maps, Darren's testimony, even the architectural inspection ambush. He took notes the whole time, nodding slowly, and when I finished, he simply said, We're opening a county inquiry. Quietly for now, but the fuse is lit. Within 48 hours, things exploded. First, the local news ran a feature. Mountain property owner battles HOA over fraudulent takeover. Footage from the sheriff incident played on loop alongside an interview with Mabel, who, God bless her, managed to say, Karen's got more nerve than a possum on moonshine with complete seriousness on camera. Then came the real bombshell. The county clerk's office filed a formal complaint with the North Carolina Attorney General's office, citing sustained abuse of procedural authority involving Whispering Pines HOA, including evidence that zoning files had been altered without oversight. The complaint named Karen Pendleton, Terry Goss, and Paul Lemasters, the HOA's architectural compliance chair, as subjects of investigation. Karen was served with a subpoena at her home. Cameras caught it. She slammed the door on the deputy and screamed about deep state land activists. That soundbite made it all the way to regional TV. Laura, meanwhile, was on fire. We had our first hearing scheduled, a motion for a preliminary injunction to stop the HOA from contacting me, fining me, or entering my land under any pretense. The courthouse was packed. Locals, reporters, even some off-duty sheriff's deputies. Darren testified first, clear and steady. Then Mabel, who brought the house down by bringing photographs from the 80s that clearly showed the parcel boundary signs, complete with dates written on the back in faded ballpoint ink. Then Laura brought out the emails, and the room went dead silent. She read aloud the subject line, Parcel 37F Absorption Strategy, then line after line about covert assertion of control, preemptive compliance visits, and leveraging our influence at zoning to secure de facto HOA jurisdiction. The judge, a gray-bearded man with the temperament of a fence post, finally looked up from the file and said, Is this some kind of joke? Karen, seated in the gallery with two lawyers who looked like they regretted waking up that morning, stood up and asked to be heard. The judge allowed it. She launched into a half-unhinged monologue about community integrity, environmental cohesion, and the responsibility of organized land stewardship in a fractured rural world. Laura let her ramble. The judge didn't interrupt. Then Karen made a mistake. I acted in the best interest of Whispering Pines, she declared, face red, hands shaking. If we didn't take preemptive control, people like Mr. Drake would erode the character of the ridge. The silence that followed was palpable. Laura stood slowly. Your Honor, I'd like the court to take note that the defendant just admitted, under oath, that her actions were intentionally undertaken outside of legal authority, as a strategy to take control of private land. The judge nodded once. The motion for injunction was granted on the spot. HOA officials were barred from contacting me or setting foot on my property pending further litigation. But it didn't stop there. The very next morning, Karen Pendleton was arrested at her home by county deputies on charges of attempted fraud, abuse of zoning process, and falsification of public records. Terry Goss and Paul Lemasters were both placed on administrative leave. Whispering Pines HOA was served with a temporary suspension order, and the press, they devoured it. CNN ran a 2-minute segment titled, HOA Tyrant Arrested in Property Grab Scandal. Homeowner Fights Back. TikTok stitched together clips of Karen's rants, Mabel's quotes, and Laura's courtroom smirk into a viral meme, soundtracked by Johnny Cash. Neighbors who had once waved politely at me now stopped their cars to say, "You're the guy from the news," and "God bless you, man." That HOA was a nightmare, but my favorite moment. The next Sunday, someone planted a wooden lawn sign at the community trailhead. "We stand with parcel 37F. Free the ridge." I left it there. The week after the hearing felt like stepping out of a hurricane and finding the house still standing. Barely. The calls slowed, the mailbox stayed mercifully empty, and for the first time since moving in, I sat on my porch swing with coffee in one hand, a book in the other, and not a single clipboarded HOA missionary lurking in the brush. But the storm had only moved downhill. Whispering Pines, once the self-declared pinnacle of order and community unity, was imploding like a rotted-out dam. With Karen behind bars and her lieutenant suspended or subpoenaed, the HOA was left in the hands of confused volunteers, shell-shocked residents, and a boardroom with more unpaid invoices than functioning board members. The county's interim oversight report landed like a neutron bomb. 17 separate instances of procedural misconduct, 9 documented property harassment cases, and 5 allegations of forged compliance notices, some going back over 2 years. Laura forwarded me a copy of the full audit with a sticky note attached. This is what organized tyranny looks like in cul-de-sac form. One by one, other residents began stepping forward. A couple named the Harpers came forward about illegal fines they'd paid to keep their backyard bird feeders. A widower recounted how Karen had threatened to have his garage removed by enforcement unless he paid for a roof color match. One man discovered the HOA had been secretly charging him double dues for excessive grass height. His house was surrounded by gravel. Then came the class action filings. Laura coordinated with a second firm specializing in HOA litigation to file a joint suit on behalf of 12 Whispering Pines homeowners, citing emotional distress, unlawful assessments, retaliatory zoning complaints, and loss of property value. Within days, that number grew to 28. At the same time, our personal lawsuit against Karen and the HOA moved forward. The judge allowed our fraud and harassment claims to proceed to civil trial. We sought damages for everything: legal costs, property devaluation, emotional distress, and the cost of replacing all the infrastructure Karen had tried to sabotage. The number Laura settled on? $1.3 million. Karen's attorney tried to laugh it off in preliminary negotiations until we showed them a video of Karen screaming, "You're evicted," at me on my own driveway, then another one of her waving a forged zoning map in front of a deputy, then the emails. They stopped laughing. The HOA, desperate to distance itself from the nuclear fallout, began a full unraveling. The board resigned en masse. An emergency meeting was called and held in the community center, which, thanks to some twist of irony, bordered my parcel. I was invited to attend. I declined, but Mabel went, and she gave me the full report afterward. "Wasn't a meeting," she said, sipping sweet tea on my porch. "It was a damn funeral. One lady cried about the wind chime thing. Another fella tried to blame it all on solar panels. Somebody suggested we rename the HOA and start over. Got laughed out of the building." The county eventually revoked Whispering Pines HOA's authority, pending reformation under new oversight. Until that happened, it was legally dissolved. The sign at the neighborhood entrance, once bearing a golden eagle and the words Whispering Pines HOA, preserving community values, was quietly removed one foggy morning. In its place, someone hung a hand-painted banner. "Private property is not a democracy." I didn't put it there, but I didn't take it down either. A few days later, the sheriff's office dropped off the final notice. Karen had been formally indicted on multiple felony counts, including falsifying public records and conspiracy to defraud. Her trial was scheduled for the following quarter. She'd posted bail, but a gag order prevented her from speaking publicly. A small but deeply satisfying silence. Laura called that evening with a celebratory tone I hadn't heard in months. "We did it," she said. "Not just for you, for the whole damn neighborhood." "And we're not even done," I replied. "Not yet," she agreed, "but close." I walked the property line that night, dogs at my side, flashlights swinging in arcs across the gravel. The repaired fence posts stood straight. The house was quiet. The woods, finally, belonged to the wind again. I stopped at the edge of my driveway, where the old gate had been, and dug a small post hole. Into it, I dropped a freshly lacquered wooden sign that Sarah had carved herself. "Private land. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Who? Not welcome, not subtle, not poetic. But God, it felt good. The morning after the sign went in, I slept late for the first time in weeks. No knocks at the door, no HOA reps with clipboards. No shadows moving at the edge of the woods pretending to survey drainage lines. Just sunlight, the smell of fresh-cut cedar, and Sarah making pancakes with too much vanilla. The mountain had gone quiet, and for the first time since we unloaded that moving truck, it didn't feel like a temporary ceasefire. It felt like peace. Of course, peace comes with paperwork. Laura and I finalized the civil suit within the month. The court approved the full $1.3 million settlement. HOA assets were frozen, their insurance carrier got involved, and Karen's personal liability meant she'd be working through that debt long after the bars closed behind her. We agreed to seal certain exhibits, mostly because I didn't need the emails with subject lines like "aggressive subjugation plan" ending up on daytime television. But what I hadn't expected was what came after. It started small, a few emails forwarded by Laura from other landowners in the region, asking if I could share advice on how to deal with their own HOA nightmares. Then came calls from a few local papers, then podcasts, then an invitation to speak at a land use panel in Asheville. I wasn't looking to become anyone's hero, I was just trying to move into a house. But apparently that had turned me into something else. A case study, a cautionary tale, and maybe even a spark. The piece I wrote for North Carolina Landowner Journal went semi-viral in legal circles. I titled it plainly, "How to Survive an HOA That Doesn't Own You." It covered everything: deed research, plat maps, title history, cease and desist strategy, and, yes, keeping laminated copies of your boundary survey on hand. Simple things. But judging by the flood of responses, apparently simple was what people needed most. 3 weeks later, I was invited to speak at a local council meeting in Flat Rock. Sarah joked that I should bring the bare mailbox as a prop. I didn't, but I did bring Mabel, who introduced me with a proud glare and the warning that if this man tells you to read your damn title report, you better listen. The crowd laughed, then listened. I kept it short. "This isn't about HOAs," I said. "Not really. It's about people who think power justifies anything. About how rules become weapons in the hands of people who forget what they're for, and about what happens when the wrong person decides your land is more valuable under their control." Afterward, a young couple from out of town approached me. They were buying property in the next county and had just received a surprise compliance letter from an HOA they never signed on to. They asked for advice. I gave them Laura's card and told them to start a file. I also told them to plant a camera and never, under any circumstances, agree to courtesy inspections. It kept happening. Farmers, veterans, retirees. One woman who'd been fined $2,000 for having too many wind chimes. Apparently Karen wasn't the only HOA tyrant who'd mistaken a gate code for divine right. So I made it a habit. A small one. Nothing dramatic. Just a few Zoom calls here and there, occasional consultations, and one radio interview that led to someone at the Charlotte Observer calling me the landowner whisperer. I hated that, but I liked what came with it. People pushing back, learning the system, refusing to be steamrolled just because someone printed a rulebook with no spine. Meanwhile, life on my ridge settled into a rhythm. Sarah planted a row of mountain laurel. The dogs got fat and lazy. I built a canoe rack by the water and finally installed the solar panel array I'd been meaning to get to. Nobody bothered me about design uniformity. Nobody asked for my siding color code. And nobody, thank God, ever again tried to vote me into a community I didn't ask to be part of. The last time I saw Karen, she was being led out of the courthouse in cuffs, wearing a tailored suit and a face so tight with fury it looked like it might snap off. Our eyes met briefly. Not long, but enough. I gave her a small nod. Not cruel. Just final. She didn't nod back. I didn't need her to. I already had everything I wanted, 12 acres of sky, 1 porch swing, and a wooden sign that said everything I'd ever need to say. Private land trespassers will be prosecuted. HOA, not welcome home.